Hello and welcome to a Titan tutorial video. I'm one of the developers of Titan and I'm going to be giving you a basic tour of the platform. So for this tutorial, I'm going to start by making an account, show you around the platform as what is there to see in terms of bricks and flows, and finally we will build a sample flow together so that you can get an idea on how all of this works. So let's begin. We're going to start with signing up. When you first enter the Titan platform, since you do not have an account, you will be greeted with a login screen. To make an account, simply click on Create Account, which will lead you to a page where you can enter your email address. After typing in your email address, just click on Sign Up, and you see a message that an email has been sent to you for confirmation. So here's the email that I just got from Titan. If I want, I can just click on this button here and complete my sign up. However, even though this message is shown properly on the Gmail web client, it could be that the client you use for emails may have problems rendering this button. In such a scenario, you can see a link to the sign up page right at the bottom of the email. So if you don't have this button in your email, just click on the link below. Let's continue to sign up. Let me enter the information and finally sign up. So that's how easy you can get an account on the Titan platform. Now that we're logged in, right off the bat you can see a list of boxes with a play button inside. These are called flows. A flow, simply put, is basically a program that lets you build stuff with the help of bricks. And what are bricks? A brick is a piece of code that executes a certain task. For example, in Titan, we have a brick that sends a message to Telegram. So you put some bricks together, depending on what you want to build, and then you just connect them. Once you're done, you can click on the play button and the flow will run and execute all the bricks in the flow turn by turn. So coming back to the flow list, you can see a few flows already created. You can see the usernames of the users that the flow belongs to. And the reason you're able to see these flows is because the owner has explicitly decided to have their flow publicly available on the platform. So there's nothing to worry about because the flows that you make are by default private and only for you to use. Before we build a flow, I would like to show you guys the other two pages. Moving on to the brick page, you can see that it is pretty empty. And that's because we do not have any bricks installed at the moment. This also answers the question you may be wondering that where do these bricks actually come from? Well, that's what I want to show next. The brick store. This is a newly added page to the platform, which allows users to browse for bricks. And within this list, you can look around, click on a package, read up on it, and if you like what it offers, you can click on install. So currently for this example, I'm about to show you, I need only 2 of these packages. So I'm going to open them up, click on install. And there you have it. You have now installed the package bound to your account, which you can use in your flows. Let me just go ahead and install the other package I need, and we'll be on our way ahead. So now that I've installed 2 packages, if I go back to my bricks, I can see the packages that I just installed. And I can expand them, read up on it again, and if I don't want them anymore, I can delete them. Alright, so let's start by making a flow. Let's click on this gigantic add button here, type in the name of our flow, let's call it test, and click create. Once I've created my flow, as you can see that it's by default private, that means the flow is only visible to me. I can click on it and open the flow. And here we have the editor. On the left side here, you have the brick pane. Anything that you have installed or anything that you can see in the My Bricks page, you will see it here as well. On the right side is your work area. This is where you add the bricks. Let's start. So for this example, I would like to build an endpoint that responds with a simple hello world. I'll start with pulling in all the bricks that I'm going to need for this example. And now let me explain shortly what each brick does. The request brick registers an endpoint in the Titan platform that responds to either a GET or a POST request, for each of which the output is sent through a port respectively. It does this by registering an endpoint to the URL titandevops.org/endpoint/your username /the flow name and /the brick name that is responding to the endpoint. So for example, if the name of my brick is request 1, the endpoint will look something like this. The response brick is used to send back to the sender of the request a response with whatever input is given to it. For this example, we're going to pass it a constant. So whenever the user makes a GET request, it receives a constant response. The template processor is going to help us transform the information sent to us in a POST request, and then finally answering it back to the client through another response brick. So, if in the POST request I receive, for example, let's say a temperature value, I can use the template processor to generate a sentence out of it. Okay, so the next step is to connect all of the bricks together and set up our flow. I'm going to start with connecting the request brick with the response one. So let's go ahead and do that. And on connection, I can see that this dialog opens up. This is the port mapping dialog. Like the name suggests, this dialog allows us to map ports. On the left, we see the source, which is the output of the request brick. And on the right side, we see the target, which is the input of the response brick. So let me try and explain what kind of data are we dealing with in each of these ports. As you can see, both the request and the response bricks deal with an endpoint object. This object contains a request ID and a request map. The request ID is basically an identifier of the client that allows these bricks to know and remember who actually the client was that sent the request, so that the response can be sent to that client that sent the request. The request map is the contents that the client would send within their request. Since this is a GET request, we do not have to worry about the request map on the source, but only on the target, as a GET request only sends back data. So to start things off, let's go ahead and map our request IDs. I'm going to select request ID on the source and select request ID on the target and click on confirm. What this did is it actually mapped the request ID from the source to the target, and this means that the request ID that I receive in the source will be sent to the request ID in the target. So now, what about the request map? As we are dealing with a simple example, let's go ahead and add a constant. And once my constant is added, I can go ahead and extend the request map by clicking on this plus button here. And now I can finally say that every time I get a GET request, I want the response brick to send back a constant with the value hello world. What this would do is that whenever my endpoint is called, the response brick will only send back a constant called hello world. Alright, now that these ports are set up, let's move on to our next bricks. Let me close this connection, and I'm going to start by dragging a connection from the post port of the request to the input of the simple template processor, and I get a dialog opened. For this, I'm going to be actually using the request map here. Because this is a post request, I'm expecting the client to send something in the request map. And I'm going to use the contents in the request map, and I'm going to use the simple template processor to transform it into a sentence or some kind of message. So let's go ahead and do that. To do that, I have to extend the request map into an object that I will actually receive by the client. And the object that I will receive will have a body, which will be of type map. And we can keep the key type and the type to string for now. And then I can further extend the body to have a message of type string. And then I will use this message in the template processor, and I will map these two together. And that will be about it for these two ports. Let's move on. So before I connect the template processor with the response brick, I need to set up the template processor further. When I click on the template processor, I see a property pane open up. Over here, I can set the template that I want to show. Let's open up this dialog. The brick already comes with an example that tells you how to use the template processor. As you can see, anything that I want to replace in my message, I have to precede it with a $sign. Let's go ahead and write our message. So I went up ahead and wrote a sentence called, "A client has sent us a message which is $message." And the reason why I call it message is because this is the name that I used when I was mapping the ports. Let's go ahead and save this, and now we can move forward. Alright, so let's go ahead and drag the connection from the output of the template processor to the input of the response brick. And we have the dialog. And now I can just get the result of the template processor and map it to the message of the response brick and click on confirm. So now we're nearly done, but we have forgotten something, and that is the request ID. How would the response brick know who the client is? And since the response brick is not connected to the request brick, we don't have the request ID to map to. To solve this problem, we make use of the buffer. Let's close this connection and go back to the old connection that we had between the request and the template processor. Since I'm not using the request ID, I can add this to the buffer. And when I close this and open the connection between the processor and the response brick, I can see that I have now my request ID ready to use. I can just click it and map it to the request ID in the response brick. And there you go. Now my flow is ready to run. Alright, let's close this dialog and get ready to run the flow. Before I start my flow, I would like to start the log pane so that I can see anything that's happening within the flow. And click on the play button here. And there you have it. My flow is running and my request brick has registered. That means my endpoint is ready to respond to the client. So to test the endpoint, I'm going to be using Postman. You can use any other tool of your liking that can test a REST API, but I'm going to be using Postman, and let's begin testing our endpoint. First of all, I'm going to be testing the Get Endpoint, and to do that, I need to enter the URL, and the URL, as we discussed before, is the Titan website, endpoint, / my username, which is Adnan Cheng, and then I can write the name of my flow, which is test, and then finally the name of my brick, which is request 1. And when I click send, I see that because I mapped a constant called hello world, I receive a response called hello world. Alright, now that we're done with the get request, let's go ahead and do the post request. Let's open a new tab, paste the link from the get request, and change the request type to post. Let's open the body. I'll go with JSON, and inside the JSON, I'm going to send a message. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? And the reason I'm calling it a message is because that's the name of the variable I used when I was mapping the ports. So let's go ahead and click send. And there you have it. I get back a message called a client has sent us a message which is can you hear me? Can you hear me? And the reason we got this is because of the simple template processor. So there you have it. We have now managed to pretty much start up our own REST API with the help of a few breaks and the Titan platform, and we did all of that with 0 lines of code. I hope this example helps you explore more of Titan's features and maybe aid you in building projects that would otherwise be difficult to do so with code. If you're curious about the details of port mapping, we also have a video up on our YouTube channel. Do check that out and maybe browse for more if need be. Thank you very much for watching.